transportation actually accounts for nearly a fifth of global CO2 emissions. And this transportation is not only the transportation of goods, but also the transportation of people. Transitioning now from the actual driving experience to from a corporate perspective, you also need to change sort of your reporting structure as well, right? So one reason of doing this again, right, is also measuring your carbon footprint. So you want to also understand, okay, what was the mileage of that employee, and understanding, okay, on that route he had, this CO2 footprint.
Hello and welcome to the Sustainable Healthcare Podcast. My name is Frederik. I'm the CEO of Green Innovation Group. We are a management consultancy that work on decarbonizing healthcare, as you probably already know. Today I have a guest in the studio. Isabel works with Here Technologies. It's a company that works on helping corporates understand where the stuff is and how it gets there. And in today's episode, we're talking about the transition to electrical vehicles. And particularly, we're talking about the challenges for a major pharma company to actually make the switch from having a couple of thousand fossil fuel-based vehicles and turning that into an electric vehicle fleet. So that conversation is really exciting. I hope you will learn a lot. I learned a lot from it. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Isabel from Here Technologies. Hello, Isabel. Welcome to the Sustainable Healthcare Podcast.
Yeah, hi, Frederik. Great to be here, and thanks actually for the opportunity to join your podcast today. Very excited.
You're more than welcome. Isabel, where are you calling in from?
I'm actually in London this week. I was just attending the Gartner Supply Chain Symposium the last 3 days, which was, very interesting. It was all about supply chain, sharing best practices across industries, also medtech and pharma, a lot of attendees, and actually sustainability also being a topic, over the last 3 days, and how to include that in supply chain transformation projects. Yeah.
Okay. So you went to a conference in London on supply chain and learned some things about sustainability and what's top of mind. And you're still
exactly.
there, but you're based in Switzerland, right?
No, actually, I'm based out of Berlin. So
okay.
my colleague is based out of Switzerland, and I'm based out of Berlin. So one of our biggest offices at Here is actually in Berlin, and I've been living there for the past 5 years now. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, I wasn't completely on top of that. Before we get into who Isabel is, who are Here?
Yeah, so Here Technologies is the full brand name. And Here is the world's leading location data platform. What does that mean? It's all about location technology, location services that you use actually every day, probably without noticing, in all your different applications on your smartphone, your weather application, your mobility app, your food delivery. They all use location services to some degree. So essentially, the questions like where am I, or where's my shipment, when will my food delivery arrive, these are the kind of questions that you solve with location intelligence. And Here has built over the last 35 years a very extensive and rich location data platform where we source a lot of different data, bring it together, have a very high data quality assurance process, and then build services on top of that. That we then offer to B2B companies that need a map, routing, need to understand better, where their shipments are, and these are the kind of use cases that we help with.
It's the corporate where's my stuff.
Exactly.
Functionality.
Cool. Very good summary.
So I think that makes a lot of sense. And the company is it based out of Switzerland?
It's actually headquartered in Amsterdam. So
Okay.
Amsterdam is the main headquarter. The three biggest offices are actually Berlin, Chicago, and Mumbai. So India, we have a very big office as well. One more point to add is really a global map. So we source data across all different regions, even a bit more, let's say, difficult countries like China or South Korea, where actually geodata is considered property that is not allowed to leave the borders. That's where we work with local partners to also offer services in those countries. So very
So a global
truly
company
global map.
with a global service and value offering. That makes perfect sense. And now we have all of the business stuff sorted out. We know who Here Technologies are now, and we have an idea of what you represent in the market. But who is Isabel then? How did you get to work with location technology?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it might not be the first thing that comes to mind. Actually, I studied logistics and did a master's degree in logistics, and I'm still very passionate about logistics, and we're going to talk about it later.
As one is,
exactly. Actually, also about just generally process optimization and that kind of led me then, after finishing my master's degree, to think, okay, where exactly what do I want to improve these processes? And the most, let's say, maybe obvious one would be a supply chain manager at Amazon. But then actually the opportunity popped up with Here Technologies, where they were looking specifically for the transport and logistics department, someone who has that specialized knowledge, but then in the perspective of location intelligence. So that's intrigued me, and that's how I actually got to the topic of location technology, learning about that, and started it here. And this is nearly 5 years ago now.
And what's really fascinating here, because you told me a bit about this, that when you're doing, for instance, in logistics, fuel optimization is a huge topic. And if you're getting a truck to deliver cargo from A to B, there's a lot of things that you can and cannot do. Can you maybe to our listeners? I mean, I think all of us understand that there's a need for trucks to deliver stuff around the world. When you're looking from a logistics optimization point, what are the things that you're considering, for instance, within the realm of fuel optimization?
Fuel optimization is a really important one, because it becomes more and more important as the carbon footprint that you need to track on each transport leg and delivery. You need to essentially know your fuel consumption, and you want to optimize your fleet also depending on which vehicle, where's the delivery. So that's where location data becomes important, because you need to also take into account not only the fastest or the shortest route calculation, but things like slope and elevation. So am I going over a mountain, or sometimes it would make more sense to go maybe a detour, and then also talking about EV, so electric vehicles. Again, you need to optimize your route if you're driving an EV rather than based on gasoline, right? So these are all different what we call attributes that are taken into account when you calculate.
You put that into the calculation, so you can actually help me understand also, if I'm a truck driver. Now you're in the UK, so it's probably right turns there, but in the rest of Europe, you would optimize for having as few left turns as possible for the truck, because that means you would stand still in the truck, and you would have the engine running whilst it would be standing still and waiting for its turn to turn.
Exactly. And same with stop and go traffic, for example. So the fuel optimization also really important, takes into account what vehicle type. So again, it's different if you're driving your private car, or if you're driving a huge truck, right? These are all different types of parameters that are taken into account. And actually we did something together with the Swiss retailer Migros, if you know them, where we actually developed CO2 dashboard.
What does Mirkos do?
Yeah, so they're mainly in Switzerland. I would say maybe in short a supermarket chain. They think they do way more beyond that as well, but essentially food and beverages, for example, right? And yeah, and again, they have a very hybrid fleet. So from the small sprinters to the big trucks, and so for these kind of different vehicle types, they wanted to understand, okay, how do I optimize my route depending on which vehicle I'm using for whatever delivery I'm talking about, right? So that was an interesting case where...
But they were optimizing for CO2 footprint to reduce
Exactly.
the CO2 emissions as much as
Exactly.
possible.
Exactly.
Which quite often, I suppose, would have a coincidental link to fuel consumption.
Yeah.
And probably also saving a little bit of money on the way.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially the business case has to make sense, and it does, right? It's what many might, and I think you've talked about this already in your podcast as well, right? That it might seem contradictory, but actually it's not either sustainability or cost reduction. It goes hand in hand.
Amazing. That's a really interesting case. I think one of the things that we typically have a very hard time wrapping our heads around when we're not working in logistics is how many things are being orchestrated and traded around and delivered at various addresses at all times.
Yeah.
It's really an interesting data case to run optimization scenarios on, and there's a lot of room for improvement. And what I, as a sustainability consultant, find most interesting in it is that you're not only reducing CO2 emissions, you're also drastically reducing costs quite often. And there's a direct link. When you reduce the CO2 emissions, you're typically also reducing the dollar cost. And that just makes the business case more likely to actually reach implementation and come to fruition. So, really good job there.
It's a good point. One example that comes to mind is also now talking specifically not about the route itself, but then again about ETA, so estimated time of arrival. And one case that we were now working on specifically was how to have less air freight, more sea freight. And those who work in logistics might know that the ETAs that you get, if you even get any, are more about, oh yeah, we're going to deliver in week 48 when it comes, via ocean freight, which makes it very, very difficult for logistics and fulfillment teams and supply chain managers to, optimize their inventory and so forth if they get like a very, very rough
want to know
indication.
Where's my stuff.
Exactly, and they want to be more accurate. So so that's actually again where we can contribute and help to getting a more reliable ETA, a more accurate ETA, to then help. Okay, if I better understand when my shipment will arrive, where it is exactly, then I can also start reducing air freight and shifting more to sea freight because I just can plan better and further ahead. So that's another example where the cost then also assigned to that. I mean, air freight is at least 3.5 times higher than sea freight. So it's a very attractive business case, also moving away from air freight, because, essentially you're saving a lot of costs as well.
Yeah. So again, cash rules everything around me, and that goes for freight methods as well. So sort of looking at the whole realm of where's my stuff, of course, something that is relevant is how is my stuff going where it is or where it's going. And a part of that agenda is the conversion from fossil fuel-based transportation to electrical vehicles. And I was thinking maybe you can walk us through a little bit of the case behind this. Why is this an important sustainability case to have the transition to electric vehicles? Can you walk us through the main points here?
one main point that I want to establish at the beginning is that transportation actually accounts for nearly a fifth of global CO2 emissions. And this transportation is not only the transportation of goods, but also the transportation of people. And yeah, in the last episode, we were more focusing on the supply chain side and delivery of goods and transportation of goods. But now talking about also transportation of people, that's where then EV, right, electric vehicles, are a big topic from a private perspective, but also from a business and corporate perspective. Yeah.
So that's the fly-in. It's 1/5 of all of the global emissions there from transport. And a key contributor in there is, of course, the combustion engine technology, where you take a fossil fuel, put it inside an engine, make it explode, and then you generate propulsion from that. If we're looking for the pharmaceutical industry, where do we have person transport? What are we transporting around that is not transported in trucks?
Yeah. Yeah, so usually pharma companies have outsourced their logistics, right? Again, sort of the transportation of goods to logistics providers like DHL, UPS that handle that for them. But they nevertheless still have a very big fleet that they operate, which is their own employee car fleet. So, for example, Novartis has 25,000 vehicles, or AstraZeneca 17,000 vehicles. So we're not just talking about a few. This is a massive number. Pharma specifically has recognized that there is an opportunity to, well, transition to EV, and with that contribute to decarbonizing healthcare as well, right?
So what are all these cars transporting around? So 17,000 AstraZeneca vehicles.
Exactly.
What are they transporting around?
Essentially, it's their sales force, right? So people that actually go out into the field, present the newest studies to the doctors or hospitals, and have the luxury of having a company car. But again, they really are part of the corporate also to help this transition to EV, and at the same time still do their job efficiently, right?
I think this is a really interesting case to bring up, because it really sheds light on just how old school this industry actually is, right? That it's using live salespeople that go door to door to clinics in order to position and sell products, and that's something that we're seeing in fewer and fewer industries, and it's not really. It seems as if the digital sales meeting has not really caught on to the same degree as it has in other industries. I mean, in our own industry, in consulting, a lot of that happens online today. We do not see the same need to being physically present with the client, which used to be basically the one of the tools of the trade in consulting, was that you needed to be there with the client. So do you think it's if we're looking at the Ellen MacArthur double butterfly diagram, that's part of the circular economy, and we sort of look at the case of sales forces, what would be the optimal circular economy case for a sales force?
Circular economy. So I think in healthcare specifically, and pharma, right? It does come in generally in sales, but especially in this industry, it does come down to, okay, do I trust this person? Do I have a relationship with the person? So therefore, what we're now so used to, right? Just jumping on a Teams call and discussing, projects or business or whatever over a video call, I think might work to a certain degree in the industry, but essentially you still have to go there and maybe show the new device and present it and make give the doctor, surgeon, whoever also the chance to touch it, the look and feel, try it out. So I think this will always be the case, that the sales person still has to go actually on site and meet the surgeon and doctor, and also understand their daily struggles, and build that relationship essentially.
Yeah, and build the trust as well, right? Because
Exactly.
it's a very fragmented field where I mean, now in Denmark we have a relatively centralized system with only 5 regions that purchase most of the healthcare equipment that's being purchased in the regions. So they purchase everything for the hospitals basically, and then we have very few private hospitals that are their own sales targets, you could say. But I think it's really interesting hypothesis that we can actually kind of sideline a little bit with how people have been challenging telemedicine, right? And saying, well, it's not really feasible to have a video call with the doctor because they rely so much on sensory input that they may or may not even be registering. They may notice, is the patient looking pale? Do they have a weird orientation in the room? Do they smell funny? Some of these things that the human brain is really good at taking in through the sensory organs that may not be sort of a coordinated part of the practice. But when push comes to shove, it actually shows that a lot of telemedicine is quite feasible. So it would be interesting to say, okay, what is the most sustainable sales meeting is the one that we never have to be physically present at, right? Because that would, in its essence, mean that we wouldn't even have to transport ourselves with an EV. We would have to not transport ourselves at all. But if we just discard that premise completely and say, okay, we choose to believe that we live in a world where salespeople will need to go around in the pharmaceutical and medtech industry in order to meet their clients and build those relationships, build that trust, build that education as well on how to use the devices and what do you need to pay special attention to with this device or this drug. Then switching to EV would of course be a great case.
Yeah, and I think it's again not either or, right? So telemedicine still has obviously its case, and for many treatments that would be the preferred way to go, right? But it can't, I think, be 100%. So you will still have both in parallel, and especially when we're talking about elderly people, or if we're talking about people in very remote locations where the doctor might not even have the Wi-Fi access that he needs, right? So we are thinking now very, I think also from, based out of Germany or Denmark or wherever we have that access. But if you go maybe to central Turkey, it might look very much different, right? And they also need the same healthcare that we do. So I think there's definitely areas where it can be possible to go virtual and remote, and others where you just need to have a physical person there. Yeah.
Would you, in HERE Technologies, would you look at that as part of your analysis for a client? Would you help them sort of figure out where would we have cases for virtual settings, or would you only work on moving stuff around based on locations?
I think I would see that as more of your part, for example, as a consultancy and expert in that field of sustainability, is to identify the areas where maybe alternative technologies can help. But then again, here as a specialist for location services, location intelligence, is again providing information on, okay, how to optimize getting from A to B, providing the information that also making the driver essentially also accept the EV transition and make his or her life easier. So yeah, that's I think where we come in, and we have the expertise facing those specific EV challenges. Whereas from a broader perspective, I think like you and your team could add alternative ways as well.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, because often that will be one of the questions we're asking. If we're consulting a hospital, we would ask, the most sustainable patient is, of course, the patient that never needs to enter the gates of the hospital. that, and of course prevention is a huge topic here. But
Yeah.
when we're looking, if we accept the premise that we need a transition to electrical vehicles, and I think it's at least very easy for us in Green Innovation Group to subscribe to that premise. What are the key challenges when you're trying to transform a fleet? Say we're looking at AstraZeneca's 17,000 vehicles. Well, what are the challenges they're facing in terms of making that switch?
Yeah. Well, some people who maybe already are EV drivers might think, okay, this is, like not a challenge anymore, that people really think, oh, I can't get that far with my battery, and that I'm scared to run out of battery halfway, and then I can't find an available charging point, and don't know how to get there, and I won't make it to my meeting, and so forth. So these are all kind of questions that come up. EV drivers might know, actually, it's not that dramatic. And there are already some applications out there that support that. But then again, from a corporate perspective, to really make that transition of, I think, 100% of their fleet should be by 2025 EV, you need to also take these challenges that the driver and their sales, essentially employees, are facing seriously, and say, okay, we want to help you with this adoption. We want to make you feel more comfortable having that driving experience. And with that, providing services like EV routings, for example, that show you, okay, not only when you're on the go, where is the nearest charging point, but maybe already one step further in your planning process. So when you plan your trip, okay, this is a longer one, I need to plan some extra time for charging, and you will still be in time for your meeting. So it's both for the planning side and for the actual driving, then providing more information.
It's really interesting point, this whole having to stop to charge every 3-4 hours, where for most driving safety sort of rule of thumbs, that would be a really good idea to stop in and just recharge the human machine while you're charging the battery. So range anxiety is one thing. Another thing is this, as you say, the routing, where you're quite dependent that you can get to a charging station with the range that you have, and that it has the available socket for the vehicle that you're driving, of course. Are there other challenges for if we're looking at a pharma company that wants to make that switch?
Yeah, maybe just one more point. What you just said on the available charging station is exactly what you just said. There's many different also charging adapters, right? So you need to make sure you go to the one that is fit for your vehicle specifically, because not every charger works with every vehicle. And that's exactly what then we do as a company, right? We source many different data sources and then bring it all together and create services out of that show you exactly, okay, for this vehicle type, you should go to this charging station, and it's available or not available. But then transitioning now from the actual driving experience to from a corporate perspective, you also need to change sort of your reporting structure as well, right? So one reason of doing this again, right, is also measuring your carbon footprint. So you want to also understand, okay, what was the mileage of that employee, and understanding, okay, on that route he had this CO2 footprint, and then also from a battery and warranty perspective. So you need to monitor the battery consumption and how it's performing. So the fleet manager actually at these companies has suddenly different questions he needs to answer and make sure that the company car essentially is maintained and works correctly. So this is again areas where it makes sense for pharmaceutical companies, for example, to invest themselves into such EV-specific location services rather than just taking a free application out there because it only has limited coverage. And again, they won't have access to the data because, yeah, it's a free application, right? So they really need to also understand, yeah, the patterns and how they can measure this for their internal reporting.
There's something that comes to mind now that that I've been considering is that when we're looking into the future, there's so much talk about the power to X debates on what are we going to do with the renewable electricity when we have too much, and considering that you could potentially sit on 17,000 batteries, do you think it's feasible that you could maybe take renewable electricity from the grid, store it in the batteries, drive around, and sell some of that electricity back on the grid, and sort of help with balancing the grid through these major fleets? Because I mean, one of the things that you cannot do with gasoline in today's market is to take the gasoline out of the tank and sell it somewhere. You know, there's really no market for it. But here we're actually looking at sort of a mesh solution to a major problem where we will have an ongoing challenge of balancing the grid, but we would also have potentially very large stakeholders with large fleets that could help taking off electricity and putting in electricity again.
It's an interesting question. I personally don't know. I'm not an expert on that topic, and I think you might know better than me on that one. But I think why not, right? Because the companies that we are talking to are also saying, like, we want to also understand how we, looking from a broader perspective, can contribute to the EV transition in general. So yes, their own fleet is definitely is the starting point, but then also how can we contribute to the infrastructure? Can we have our own charging points maybe? And then again, maybe that would be a way to then feed also the energy back into the grid. I don't know from how it works from a technology point of view, but I'm sure there would be some ideas around that could potentially make that work. And I'm just thinking now, because what we already do today, right, is supporting, for example, companies like Scania with their transition to EV trucks, which is again a bit different because you're talking about heavy vehicles, right, which have again a bit of different requirements. But I would have to actually ask my colleagues that are more into that topic how far along they are with those kind of conversations and how to take it one step further even, and think of ideas, as you said, feeding the energy back into the grid. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, it's something that, you know, we're moving out of the realm of what's going on in the market right now, but I think it is one of the challenges on the horizon that needs addressing. And one of the things I was told recently by someone who knows a lot about this field is that there's a challenge in terms of who are able to sell energy in which amounts and to whom as part of the problem. So not everyone can sell energy, and another one being the fees that are attached to an energy transaction. But then on top of that, there's also an insurance problem that the wear and tear on a battery will be very different from an insurance perspective if you're also using it to decharge from the battery back to the grid and not just from the battery and into the vehicle. So there's some interesting problems that are calling for solutions here, and you know, maybe it's one of the things we will hear technologies offering solutions on in the future. We don't know.
Yeah.
for now, thanks for showing us some of the ins and outs of the transition of a pharma EV fleet and why they're there. That was really insightful, and I learned a lot. So thanks a lot for being with us, Isabel, and for coming here on the show again.
Yeah, thanks. Well, again, I think it's great to see that companies like the big pharma companies are really also seeing that as an opportunity and a way to contribute to decarbonizing healthcare, right? So I'm also curious again to see more and more how can we support them further and go one step further. So yeah, thanks for brainstorming around that with me and having me on your podcast.
Amazing. You're welcome anytime.
Thanks.
Have a great day. Cheers.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Hello, dear listeners. Thanks a lot for listening in on this episode with Isabel from Here Technologies on the Sustainable Healthcare Podcast. Thanks for listening and sharing your thoughts and feedback, for liking and subscribing on wherever you get your podcast. We're releasing an episode every Monday, and try to keep the content as approachable and relevant for you as possible. The more you tell us what you like and dislike about the show, the more we can actually adjust the content of the show. So please provide us with all the feedback that you have in mind, and have a great day out there. Cheers.